Welcome to the Week in Italian Startup, where we discuss the latest highlights happening in the Italian tech and investment ecosystem. All right. Welcome back to another episode of our The Week in Italian Startup, where we bring you the latest updates and intriguing stories from the world of technology and startup. How's it going, Nick?
Ciao, Jack. Good morning. All is great. How about you?
Very good, very good. No, absolutely. A lot of very interesting news this week. So I believe in today's episode we can focus clearly on deep tech, cyber security, and maybe some new funds announcement that launched last week. So I would say let's jump right in.
Let's go.
All right, so let's talk about Finapp. First of all, a deep tech startup that has made significant strides in their field. So Finapp recently received a 3 million grant from the European Innovation Council, EIC, and their pioneering work involves innovation in CRNS probes, which essentially stands for Cosmic Ray Neutron Sensing. Again, deep tech guys will understand that. I'm not an expert, but I'm super curious about the technology. What is interesting is that essentially this kind of technology has been used to essentially measure water density computation. So what is cool is that they are basically making a next generation probe that allows people to measure water content of different elements, being it soil, being it snow, and other application, and that has definitely like a bunch of industrial and safety application that can be extremely critical. So starting from product, even if it comes from science fiction a little bit, is actually like really pragmatic and extremely helpful. What's your take on that?
No, I agree with you. Italy has a problem with water waste in particular, and this technology stems from a wide research that we have on the subject. And as you said, I am amused quite a bit by the fact that they are basically cosmic ray neutrons. That's looks like it really looks like science fiction, but it's a very interesting approach to measure and monitor water. And the startup per se has been on quite a traditional track. I mean, starting from university research, raising a couple of smaller grants, then a round, and finally there's bigger 3 million grant from the EIC. One of the only two Italian startups that received funding in this round, in the March 2023 round. And that's interesting.
Yeah, let's talk about the EIC accelerator for a second, which I thought was very interesting. So from the information I gather, basically they're targeting companies with technology readiness level between 5 and 9. And what is interesting is that they both offer grants and equity investments and actually a blended solution for companies. So of course there is a full application process that companies need to go through, but then depending on the kind of project, then they issue grants or they actually issue equity money with services attached to them. So it's a very interesting model, it's very complete in a way. And I mean, seeing the latest batch, which you shared in your newsletter, it was definitely a bunch of companies extremely focused on disruptive tech in the deep tech space. So that's definitely something valuable. Kind of a sophisticated way of structuring an accelerator, I think, is pretty interesting.
Yeah, this is basically the evolution of the Horizon 2020 program, which the EU Commission used to fund startups across Europe. Then they focused their intervention on deep tech, meaning all the fundamental technologies that were not VC ready and would not raise VC money. I remember in the application, one of the questions are, did you try hard to raise VC money? Did you raise it? If the answer is basically no, the EU would be more than happy to cooperate and to give you money to grow your technology. They are focusing on deep tech and on foundational technologies like water, space, stuff like that, because they believe They want to build this type, this bridge from TRL 5, 6 to market readiness in order to then be able to raise private capital. And they introduced this new blended finance, equity finance type of instruments, which I have to say last year they had some issues with it. There were these stories about startups that actually received, they were approved for funding and never saw the money because, well, in the commission they were discussing where the money had to come from, who was responsible for the decision, who was giving the money, how they were giving the money. So some, troubles with the new tool, and I believe that those troubles were solved, and now they are up and running with the program.
So yeah, that's interesting because the infrastructure is very solid. The sort of the methodology seems like very like functional to actually the development of companies. But yeah, if there is like problems with the flow of capital, then of course it's a massive waste of all the work. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think they were solved because I've never heard any more about issues of startups not receiving capital. So I believe now it's up and running, all smooth and clean.
All right, let's switch to cybersecurity. So two interesting deals last week. One is Ermes, and the second one is the one that basically involves directly Primo Venture with the Muscope. So maybe let's talk first about Ermes, and then we'll move, and then we can maybe do a little bit of comparison. Ermes Cyber Security is a groundbreaking browser security startup. Basically, they recently raised about 3 million euro in a Series A funding round. The round was led by Sinergia Venture Fund, the venture capital fund of Synergo Capital. Synergo is very interesting because it's a company that started as an SGR. They've been essentially very active in the private equity space with a few funds that have been like raised of the range of about 200 million per fund roughly, and they've always invested in small and medium enterprise based in Italy, so very much sort of mid-size, I would say, private equity play. And now they recently launched the venture capital fund, which is still raising, by the way, and what they're trying to do is also play in the VC space. So we've seen Synergo active in the past year as well. And this is another confirmation that the guys are extremely serious about that, and that's very interesting, I think, as a new player, I would say.
Yeah, we have at least one investment in common with Synergo, and they are a pure play Series A investor, so they really all invest in companies that are more or less in product market fit, and their goal is quite clear, the intervention is quite clear. They invest that amount of money in order to support go-to-market efforts. So pretty clear. About the round of Hermes, the article says they raised 3 million so far, but the round is still open, so I believe they will announce a further close later on this year. But for now, I mean, they started. There is the capital, and they are starting to deploy it, I think, straight away.
So let's talk a little bit about the product, which I thought it was interesting. So Hermes takes a unique behavioral approach to cybersecurity, basically focusing on what they call human-centric solution for enterprise. So the idea is essentially focusing on how exactly users interact with the net, analyzing essentially their movement, and then providing basically like insight about possible threats that might happen from this sort of interaction. I mean, I'm not an expert in cybersecurity, but I thought, this is a particular angle. I don't know what is your take on that. So yeah, the behavioral part, that's what basically fascinated me in terms of how exactly they're approaching the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. It's probably one of the new fields of intervention in cybersecurity. Watching not what's happening on the net, but what the users are doing in order to identify bad behavior. I mean, there are startups operating at different layers to identify bad behavior. For example, those that are watching the back end back operations, and the user X downloaded the file in an unusual hour from an unusual place. So that's weird, raising alarm. Their approach is browser based, so they monitor the behavior of a user on his computer while they are navigating on the web. And that's a way to respond in real time to all the series of attacks that are focused on the user actually operating on the network. Of course, they're using AI. I mean, that's the keyword, and that makes sense. I mean, if you want to take a look at behavior, you need to be able to understand what good and bad behavior is. So it makes sense. The approach is very interesting. It's a very nice product. It's at the price level, I believe. So this is not something that you and me can install on their computer, but of course it makes sense when there is a big institution and they want to protect the user and their accounts and their computers from bad actors trying to access them.
Interesting. So, given that you guys also had a very interesting investment in Muscope, is there a way to maybe compare the different approach? Because Muscope seems to me that they're actually maybe focusing on getting like an index of some sort of calculation of index for cybersecurity. So, a slightly different approach. I thought it was very curious also. Because what is cool about the deal is that they really analyze a lot of data points and they try to actually provide very accessible information for cybersecurity assessment and safety assessment through an index approach, which I thought was very, very cool and very, very intuitive. So I don't know, Nick, what is your take on that? Like what you can share actually about the deal? Yeah.
Well, this is a seed round that we're happy to lead. We are happy to lead with Klecha. Klecha is a partner of ours. They're actually a boutique investment bank, but they launched a side investment vehicle, and they're extremely strong in cybersecurity across Europe. And we got to Muscope independently in the same time, and then we decided to join forces to close the round. And what we liked of Muscope is that they're basically trying to make accessible the information about your security stance, accessible outside of the technology office or the technology team. So basically, the basic idea is Muscope is analytical platform, basically. So the basic idea is they monitor your periphery, anything that you are, it's facing the outside world, and wherever you are and your information scattered across the web and the dark web. And they create an index. So basically, they create an index on what they see about your company, either your services, your exposed services, your infrastructure, your data scattered around the web. And this index is a quick data point that gives you an idea of how well you're doing in terms of protecting your assets. I think the basic idea is security is not a technology problem, not anymore. It hasn't been a technology problem for quite a while. It's a business problem. As a business problem, you need to be able to communicate about it at the business level, outside of the CISO officer. And Muscope helps to support, to tell this story to the management in order to take action, informed action about what to do with your services, your actions about your protections and so forth. And the product has some nice implications, for example, in terms of cyber insurance, because if you have a quantitative index of your security, you can use it to index, for example, cybersecurity insurance products. You can use it to compare, you can use it to analyze your supply chain, for example. You can do a lot of interesting stuff with this type of products on the business level, not on the pure technology level. And we like the team, we like the proposition, about the way they've been working. The startup is very young, but they achieved a lot of very nice results in the first few months. So here we are. We led the round and happy to work together with the team.
Awesome, awesome. Very interesting. Definitely like worth keeping this in mind. Like cybersecurity is definitely a business problem. That's definitely a great takeaway. That's awesome.
Yeah, I remember if
All
software
right.
is hitting the world, cybersecurity is gonna bite very hard everywhere. So you need to be ready.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, moving on to the VC in new vehicle, new holding sort of space what's happening in Italy. I thought that it was very cool, very interesting that despite the downturn and the cooling off of the market, new investment vehicles and companies are starting. So let's talk quickly about Canova SGR. Basically recently announced essentially like a VC fund, a new VC fund called Nova One, and I think there's not much information about it. It's basically all it's known is that it's founded by some entrepreneur and investors from Veneto region. And I mean, despite this fact, I thought it was particularly interesting because still we are seeing new companies willing to bet to the startup ecosystem, even if there is this like a very big cooling off in the whole sector. So yeah, people are trying to keep it up and still believing in what is going to happen in the future. So I thought that was particularly interesting. So keep it up, guys. Let's do it for sure. That's cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on instead to some of the big guys, let's talk about Azimut. So Azimut has unveiled a pan-European VC strategy, introducing two new funds in their lineup called Azimut Digitech Europe. So basically there are two funds. One is AZ Rive 2 Venture Capital Digitech Europe, and the other one is LTIF Venture Capital Digitech Europe. Basically, the aim of these two funds is to bring VC investment to retails, and both of them have been developed thanks to the help of Fabio Nalucci from Jellyfy, a long-term collaborator of Azimut. So definitely that consolidates their partnership. And the idea essentially is to raise about 100 million through this strategy. And let's talk a little bit about the focus of this strategy, which I thought was particularly interesting. So it is not an early stage play, I would say, is kind of a later stage. They want to focus on Series A and Series B investment, ranging from 3 million to about 15 million in ticket. And so that's already like a first curious element, which essentially is like trying to focus a little bit later. So not only early stage. In Italy, we always see people trying to, push startup from the bottom up, but these guys are kind of taking it from the middle up. So there is a little bit of validation, and I'm sure there is a big like de-risking factor when it comes to retail VC investments. So that's interesting. And what is also basically interesting is the focus, the verticals, which essentially is, of course, AI. Big, we don't know if it's going to be a hype or not, but definitely it's here to stay. So definitely a good bet. Then fintech, vertical marketplace, HR, and welfare. So a lot of these elements have their sort of international counterpart. What is very Italian, I feel, is the welfare part, which is very, welfare tech in Italy has been like booming, trying to, support companies, giving like benefits through digital tools and whatnot. So I thought that was a very interesting like addition to the thesis. So what's your take, Nick, on this?
No, I agree with you. You said it all. It is this is a nice extension of the scope of Azimut and their venture capital endeavors. Up to now, they were focused on Italy and Italian startups. With these two new funds, they are opening up to Europe, and that's an important signal. If you change so much in your investment strategy, because expanding the geography so much requires a switch of, a change of, gear in terms of deal flow in particular and access. That's an important investment from them. But on the other side, it's an important source of diversification. So I totally understand their move. And if you move to the right, as you said, to bigger tickets, you probably have to expand your geography because you need to acquire more opportunities for to deploy this type of capital. So we have in our geography we have fewer opportunities in the round B and particularly in the round B phase. I mean, I wish there were more, but working on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is, and so.
And yeah, on top of that, the cherry on top is definitely the low valuations that are right now, startup have. So if they're basically starting investing in lower valuation with this market condition, they are basically positioned themselves for a bigger upside down the road. So it's a very interesting moment with a very interesting strategy, I would say. So as you know, we really admire the guys at Azimut, and we looked at them really closely because they kind of know what they're doing. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, after Mistral AI, I'm not sure you can say that in AI valuations are low, but I mean. We'll see. 4 weeks old, and
yes, I know.
We'll
see how it plays, but that's super interesting to follow. Yeah. All right, cool. Nick. Anything else you wanna highlight in particular?
No, I want to. I found it very interesting. The Stanford University study about the compliance of the foundational AI models with the EU AI Act. I think this is very interesting, and it says something about how the open source approaches are apparently more compliant to the EU regulation. Because as of now, if you have a closed source approach, you are not telling the world what you're doing, and so I mean, of course, you can't say you're compliant. But I believe this act will have a strong influence on anything AI, in particular related to foundational models in Europe. And I hope this will not slow us down further. That would be nice. On the other side, it could mean there will be some entry mode into the European market, and that could be good for local players. We'll see how it plays out, but
nice.
I think this is one of the interesting articles from the week. And the other interesting news, I would say, is about Compass, a consumer credit company that acquired a Swiss buy now pay later startup. And that's interesting because HeidiPay is an international player. They are active in several countries, and Compass acquiring them is an interesting signal, in particular for the Italian financial ecosystem. Not too shabby.
Awesome. All right, so that concludes today's episode of the Week in Italian Startup. We hope you enjoyed this roundup of the latest startup news. Make sure to tune in next time for more exciting updates from the world of technology and innovation. Thank you, Nick, for joining, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Jack. Have a great day. See you in a week.